Are you a leader in customer success, pre-sales, professional services, support? Do you work behind the scenes and roll up your sleeves to make sure that customers are happy? Renew. Then this is for you. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Getting it done. Services, success, and software. We'll talk with the pros that have been in the trenches, getting service teams off the ground, launching new types of groups to service customers, or running agencies that don't have a product attached to it. For the pros, by the pros. This is the GSD Podcast, and this is your host, Jeff Kushmerek.
Hey, just wanted to introduce you to this next podcast with Meg Lovell, who I met on a panel a few months ago, who just blew me away with not only just her passion for implementation, but just had some ideas that maybe I had thought about or been too scared to implement before or had gotten pushback. But she went right out and did some things, and I'm just going to not spill the secrets. You want you to listen to the podcast. But Meg's awesome, and also another caffeine junkie like myself, although I've been trying to wean off. But so that's what the first part of this conversation, we just hit record. We were talking about caffeine levels and the milligrams and everything else, and then the conversation just kind of kept going from there. So really enjoyable. If you're doing anything involved with implementation, if you've got projects that are going along, having problems getting them live, having problems getting your senior level people to accept some changes you're trying to do, get implementations charged for, and set durations, definitely give this a listen and take notes, because Meg's just chock full of information. So enjoy. We were just talking about our caffeine junkiness, and Meg is the first person I've met, not on Reddit, that talked about caffeine and milligrams, which is what I used to do before I quit. I also thought when I quit that I would be a very calm, like that guy. Everybody's like, what's he going to say? But no, I'm still all fired up and everything. It's not the caffeine. So,
hey, 900 milliliters a day keeps the gremlins away.
Oh my God. I know that's a powerful dose. And what time's your last one? Is it at 2? Do you hit the 2 o'clock?
Oh no, before lunch, definitely before lunch.
Oh, okay. So you get 900 in before lunch. That is why you're able. So Meg's pretty powerful from my interactions with her. That now I know how you just charge through everything. It's amazing. So why don't you talk about your current role at current company? Couldn't remember if we could mention it or not. So I'm going to leave it up to you.
Well, yeah, no, I'm currently employed at Everbridge. I've actually been with the company for about 10 years.
Yep.
And I originally joined up with the company, and one of my first big projects there was working with our implementations organization. So I have, 10 years of experience in implementation, from building teams, building processes, working with customers. And now I'm actually working on the flip side. I am working with other vendors now to implement new products and business strategies.
Yeah, this is great. I love that background, because we geeked out for quite a while when we got into implementation. So I wanted to get other people who were, thrust into the role or wondering if they're doing it right and everything. So I'm just assuming when you took it over, everything at Everbridge was just smooth sailing. You just had to go in and make a couple tweaks, right? Just easy day and just a couple PowerPoints and you were done.
Exactly. No, it's actually a very interesting process, because we were looking to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. And we saw an opportunity to do that with our implementation process, because, 10 years ago, a very common strategy with implementations is to throw bodies at it and to, basically make your people available for endless amounts of hours to handhold the customers through. And while that, as these SaaS products really came into their own with remote implementations, it really worked to an extent. but it's not really what customers want, need, and it just really doesn't scale economically for a company.
Absolutely. Because, if you go down that model, implementations take a really long time. Your company is trying to go like 2x in customers every year, and you can't just go 2x on employees every year, right? So
Exactly. And actually, to go back to that statement you said about implementations take a really long time, do they? How many
here we go.
implementations? How many implementations have you been through? And you've been through a 9-month, plus implementation, and you get to the end of that project and you think, why did that take so long? I felt like I did 3 weeks worth of work. How did that get spread out over 9 months? And that actually is a very good question. And that's really at the core of the way that I drive implementations.
Yeah.
Because what are you doing in that white space? There's a lot of time in implementation where both parties are doing nothing.
Yeah. Let's chat about that, because I know we got into the details on this, and we both share similar thoughts on this. A couple of ways we can approach it, but I will say the usual problems, and I'd love to hear how you address them, is that no fixed duration, no fixed cost. Customer feels like they can take as long as they want on the implementation.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a matter of, the customer feels that they can take as long as they want. We're allowing that situation. We're enabling bad behavior.
Right.
A customer truly wants to get ROI out of the product right away. I mean, how embarrassing is it to buy a product and all of a sudden your accounting team tells you that your renewal has come in? And how is the product working? Are we renewing this? You're like, well, I haven't implemented it yet. So that's not going to bode well as a purchaser.
Right.
You've just bought this product, your company's invested, but they're not getting any value at it. On the flip side, as a vendor delivering implementations, again, you have your people are engaged in a low value activity that you're spending a high amount of money on, because these days implementation specialists are paid very well for their skill set. And you don't want to waste the high skill set on that sort of activity if it's not going to be yielding results and value for the company.
Absolutely. And on that note, on the finance team sends you the renewal over. The worst part about that is if it's not complete and now you've got to pay for both vendors, right? You're deprecating one vendor and then you're moving over to the next. Those are conversations that just never go over well.
Exactly. And, if you work at a publicly traded company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to spend money wisely. And when those things come up, that's not being responsible.
Absolutely. So how did you go addressing this and fixing it? I'm sure I knew it was a bunch of different ways, but if you don't mind sharing some of the big hitters.
Yeah. Well, think about it. Back in, 10 years ago when, there wasn't a lot of software available other than the traditional, big behemoth project management programs to manage. We had, these smaller SaaS-based onboardings coming into focus. And, I basically approached this not as a project manager, but really from a psychology standpoint and human behavior. And I looked at it, what is going to drive successful behavior in our customers? So when you position yourself with unlimited implementation services, you are actually making you're making yourself your lowest priority in your customer's day.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have perhaps limitations on your implementation service, that you get X number of hours to be consumed in X time frame, that is the standard time frame for onboarding services to be completed. You don't put those limitations in place, it's going to drag out.
Right.
So, one of the first things that I always encourage people to do is, especially when you're working in a SaaS product, is eliminate the status call.
This was the big one. I remember the first time I heard this, I kind of freaked out a little bit. So I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah. And why I say eliminate the status call, because in a lot of cases, people think of the status call as we're going to show up and we're going to talk about, we'll talk about stuff.
Yeah.
And when you say, and I hate the word stuff because it's so generic, because then you get on the call. The first thing you talk about is the weather. Here's the weather here. Here's the weather there. Here's how the local sports teams go team. And then you have just blown a half hour of time. And when you think about the financial cost of that meeting and what you just spent on talking about the weather and the sports, and there was no agenda items, there was no one was held accountable to deliver anything to this meeting.
Yeah.
So when I say eliminate the status call, you're actually changing that to a meeting with an agenda. Never have a meeting without an agenda.
Right.
We're going to have a call where we traditionally had the status call, and we're going to review these open action items. And, everyone comes prepared to the meeting to talk through their items. What's blocking me? What's been accomplished? Even better if you have a system to track a lot of that automatically.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It leads to more productive meetings.
What's your perspective? I always do this situation, so I'd just love to hear your feedback on this one. But the classic, hey, we're going to meet Thursday at 11 o'clock. And then Wednesday, the customer says, not sure if we should meet. We didn't get to do any of the stuff that we were supposed to go do. So you cancel the meeting. Do you shame them? Do you try and work through stuff during that meeting?
Personally, here's how I'd approach the situation. If that is an actual trend with our customers, I would put some sort of mechanism in place to get better leading indicators in place as to, are they completing their activities? That's why, I want my customers working on something that, a predefined set of tasks.
Yep.
So that I can check in on that and make sure they're making progress. If the customer is not ready to have a meeting, absolutely don't have a meeting if they have not completed their tasks. I mean, of course, there could be a situation where they do need to meet because they need to repeat the last meeting for whatever reason.
Right.
But I also push my customers too that, if we are going to cancel that meeting at the very last second, that's still going to count against your billable hours because we have to add in that motivation factor.
Okay, I like that. That's good because you do use the hour. So you're selling these implementation hours on a billable basis. So my question to you on that point is, you have the meeting. It's scheduled for Thursday, 11 o'clock, and suddenly the customer is like, "Hey, we didn't get to any of these tasks that we were supposed to do. Can we just cancel the meeting?" And I was curious what you do about that.
Yeah. So, a late cancel is a late cancel, and that's still a billable hour.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that whole motivating the customer to make your work the highest priority. You do have to take that out of their allocation. Now, it's important that the customer knows at the beginning of the implementation process that any meetings canceled within 24 hours is still going to debit out of your bucket.
Yeah.
And that helps motivate customers to complete things, or it keeps those lines of communication open so that if they are slipping, things happen. A fire breaks out and the customer has to address it. They've got to pause their implementation for a few days, but it makes sure that they stay in contact with your team, because then your team can rebook with another customer. So you don't have an idle resource working in implementation for that hour.
No, absolutely. That's smart. So are you selling hours, or are you selling them as sort of fixed fee implementation projects?
Well, it really depends on the product. There's a couple ways that you go about it. If you have a very, a SaaS product that, 90% of your customers should be able to set it up in a certain time frame, let's say, it takes 15 hours over the course of 2 months, and you put those services, you write them right into the contract. So they're there plain as day.
Yeah.
It also actually creates a great model that if you have customers with more complex needs, or there's something bespoke that needs to be crafted, that is a great opportunity to build up your professional services business.
Yes.
So everybody should get a core implementation, but for those who want to take things further, professional services it's a great opportunity to sell those hours and get your customers to a next level.
Absolutely. And I was just chatting about this week with somebody, because a lot of SaaS people, they don't want services, and they're like, no, we don't want professional services. It's going to complicate it. We're product-led growth and all this other stuff. But there's areas where your customers are just begging for help. Like I think about like data transformation, like ETL and all that fun stuff. And then other things, your team has this expertise and your customers are just trying to get off the ground and getting successful. And so they will pay extra to remove and demystify and just make things easier and for a smoother rollout. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because one of the things that I found customers expect when they come to a software company that sells a product, they expect you to not only be experts in your product, but experts in your industry.
Yes.
And to be able to give them the best practices guidance for implementing your product in their industry. And that is a wonderful opportunity to sell professional services. And I know people shy away from professional services because it's not recurring revenue.
Right.
Wall Street loves those SaaS subscriptions because it's very predictable, repeatable revenue, whereas that professional services is one time. But you can't write off professional services completely, because that is something that is going to help you get your product more entrenched with your customers.
Absolutely.
To secure that renewal, and furthermore, growth as you produce more products, expanding your footprint with your customer.
Preaching to the choir, and led many services teams, and it was essential, especially when we had super complex stuff. And this was not on our agenda, speaking of always having an agenda for a meeting. So I hope you don't mind if I ask another question or two, because I know we're going to go down this road. How do you sniff out these services items? Are you allowed, or was your team on implementation and allowed in the pre-sales process to be able to feel that, oh, wait, this is going to actually need some services involved? Or was sort of the implementation team 1 or 2 weeks in is like, wow, this customer needs some help and we should bring in services?
Hey, great scenario. And that is something that I think that, companies should actually try and get in front of that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have your implementation specialists really involved in pre-sales processes, because again, that's non-billable time for a billable, resource. So I tried to really limit their interaction there. But certainly there's times, when to close the deal, we need to bring in someone from the implementation team to get a level of comfort with the with the customer in order to get the final signatures on that deal. But for the most part, I really like to focus my teams on templatizing the implementation. You have a basic service offering and you make it very clear to your customer in the sales process.
Yeah.
Customers want to know what they get in an implementation. And I really think to build out a successful project, speaking from the customer side, I want to know what services I'm getting from the customer and what I'm responsible to bring to the table, so that I can resource my internal team as a customer correctly.
Right.
Because if you come into the equation and you land at the implementation as a customer, and you're expecting to get, a full turnkey service, but that's not what that vendor offers, you're left with huge gaps in your skill set and a non-successful implementation. So I actually worked with our sales team and made sure that they could speak about the implementation process. So, as they could coach the customers, these are the kind of people we need on this implementation. Yep. Here's the level of effort it's going to require. And you would think, at first, salespeople are very bashful about that. And it's like, oh, I don't want to scare the customers.
Right.
It had the absolute opposite effect. Customers grew in confidence because they knew the resources they would need to bring to the table, because there was no surprises after that
when
deal
you
closed.
just come in as a salesperson with the easy button, you're basically, they'll see through, experienced buyers will see through it. They're like, oh, exactly. You don't need anything. I'm like, no, it's turnkey. Just sign here. And then next thing you know, it's like, I didn't know we needed an IT person around for 5 to 10 hours for the first 3 weeks and to do all this work. And these people aren't around. And suddenly, and then, as you say, 3 months turns into 9 months, and all these things.
Exactly. And it made the sales reps feel more confident in their sales.
Yeah.
Because they understood the basic implementation process. When they were engaging with their customers, our sales reps were absolutely empowered to understand what this customer needs cannot be accomplished in a basic package.
Right.
I need to sell them an advanced package. And again, when you get to the professional services level, you can actually pre-bundle a lot of that to make it very easy for the customer and the sales rep to sell it. And only then, beyond that, do you need to go to a bespoke solution for a very significant and custom project. But you put all those triggers in with your sales team, because they're the ones engaging in the sales process. Keep the implementation specialist, the billable resources, doing the billable work.
Yeah. I'm just curious on your model. Again, everybody's different based on the type of product that they have. Do your implementation specialists also do the project management aspect of things, or are they more like deep into the guts of the system, and then you would have sort of a project manager making sure that files are getting passed and agendas are getting written and things like that?
I think this completely depends on the product that you're implementing. So if you're working on a smaller SaaS project, one of the things you do have to consider is your customer working in an environment where they have a project manager?
Right.
So let's say you're working with, a smaller company or a rural town government. You'll run into a situation where these people don't have project management experience and they don't have project managers on staff.
Yeah.
So you need to ensure that your process is adaptable to guide your customers to make good decisions in the implementation and that your materials and process are structured enough that it leads these people through the process without project management. So with that being said, now, if your customer is buying an entire suite of products, you're working with a Fortune 500 customer, absolutely, you're going to need to bring in a project management resource because there's far too many components. But, a lot of folks out there who are, working in these SaaS-based products with shorter turn times, they can actually think about eliminating the project manager
100%.
altogether with a robust process.
Absolutely. You've got that easy 30-day, go in here, learn this, get this set up and everything, good to go. It's when I found is when you start getting into enterprise integrations and all that fun stuff, especially the big enterprise sales, especially, and they'll ask like, hey, okay, we're going to have a pre-sales call, and the PM group or the their whole PM process group wants to talk about like how you roll it out and everything. So suddenly that's when everybody starts putting Gantt charts and all that fun stuff in the pre-sales phase and everything. So yeah, that's what they expect.
Yeah. And you've got to be very careful though, because some customers are going to be scared by the Gantt charts. That's not their thing.
Absolutely. It's so funny. Yeah. Certain want to see it and, have that slide tucked in an appendix somewhere if it comes up. But otherwise, I like to have that, 3 slides that I give the sales team to present on, like, here's some faces that show that we've got some real people. Here's some logos that shows that we've done it, and maybe a lightweight bar process thing, or day 1 through 30. This is, but just a very lightweight process thing, just so they're like, okay, great. You guys have done it. You have a team. You've done it before, and you've got a process and everything.
Yeah, that's actually a really great technique. And, it's something that companies should even consider including that in like the closing packet of documents that goes over to the customer, is that, here's what your implementation includes. It's, like a week by week rundown of here are the major things that you're going to accomplish week by week or month by month in this implementation. And then you tack that onto your SOW if you've got custom services on top of that.
Absolutely. Hey, curious, did you ever do anything like a customer readiness, customer homework packet to get them started off the bat, or? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that is when you're working with these SaaS projects, a lot of the products, a lot of them start billing from day 1. Some people have milestones in place where, once the product's fully implemented, you can start that revenue recognition clock. Depends on your model. Both models, you want to get rolling really quickly.
Yeah.
So as soon as that paperwork is signed, we've got so many tools in our CRMs these days that you should be firing out a welcome packet right away, because the customers bought it. People want to get to work. Give them resources and an electronic orientation to get them started. So when they come into their first meeting, everyone is ready to work. And more importantly, when they come into that first implementation meeting, you want all the right people to sit at that table, to be present at that meeting. Because you get onto an orientation call and you go through the roll call and you're missing 2/3 of the key roles, you're not going to get off to a good start and you're not going to accomplish things. So you really want to make sure that that welcome packet includes things about building your stakeholder team. So when you kick off and you go through that live overview of the project and orient to resources, everybody's there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so true. Sometimes the buyer just says, okay, here's the person who's going to take over. And they're like, wait, what's the product again? And you got to work them through. A lot of that stuff can be in that packet that we talked about, right? Like here's our standard Excel format for getting your data, right? Like go work on that for a little bit, all these little things that can accelerate the thing. And they might not even, I've seen these packets go out and people are like, hey, can I know we said we wanted the kickoff day, like the day the contract signs, but I just saw the homework packet. We could really use a week to kind of absorb this and put stuff together, and that sort of urgency on having that immediate phone call kind of goes down.
Yeah. Well, I think you also want to be careful about those homework packets. When you send a customer a very large quantity of homework to be done,
they freak out.
It's not going to get done. By sending things in smaller, manageable chunks, think about it like your inbox. When you sit down at your inbox in the morning, are you going to write the email that takes an hour to research and put together? Or are you going to go through your inbox and look for all of the quick wins? So the things that take 2 to 3 minutes to respond to, you're going to clear those out before you get to those major items. By sending smaller chunks to your customer, you're keeping them working on something every single day. And you're keeping them moving and you're getting them in a habit of using your product, rather than slam them with a giant packet of homework all at
Absolutely.
once.
That's the smarter approach. And I'm glad you brought that up. Usually, I like using the idea of almost like a marketing campaign. Like day one, here you go. Here's your data spreadsheet. Or, that's not day one, but exactly what you're saying. But if you send them, hey, here's 15 things to go do, people are like, oh yeah, this is not happening and everything. That was a lot of information. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got to show your customer what's important for them to do, because they are new to the product. As implementers, you're working with the product every single day. And I think even the best implementation specialists start to forget a key concept. At one point, you were new at this company and you didn't know how to implement this product. Remember your journey? How long did it take you to ramp up?
Yeah.
You cannot expect that of your customer. You need to help them through the onboarding, just like your coworkers help you learn the product here at the company you work at.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such great points. And you only get those from going through this. Did you ever wind up going like any of the low touch approaches with, getting like an LMS technical approach instead of using implementers or things like that? Or I'm not sure, not everybody's product, as we said, is good for that, but there's a model that people are using these days.
Oh, I think all of those tools are absolutely wonderful. I haven't been brave enough to go the no touch model, because I think without a human being in there, and I still haven't overcome that accountability barrier.
I'm the same way. Low touch is where I stand, and maybe some office hours thrown in, or at least you get the once a week. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, LMS tools are incredibly helpful to the process.
Yeah.
You cannot scale as an organization unless you are fully investing in customer support centers, knowledge base articles, templatized items for your customers refer to, and most importantly, an LMS. If you are an organization and you are using your implementation specialists to deliver a training on your product, you are throwing money out the window. When you look at the price of what you pay for those implementation specialists to do that, you could put that into an LMS and it would actually be a far more effective training, because when people are learning in these systems, especially these new platforms, there's a couple of things you have to keep in mind. That some people are visual learners. They like to see text written, or they like to see demonstrations. Some people like to hear.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like to stop, pause, replay, and play along in their own platform. And really the only way you can do that is with an LMS. You cannot do that very effectively with an implementation specialist talking at an audience.
It's the worst. Yeah. And not only that, but some customers we work with on bringing them into the low touch model is sort of like, well, let's create, instead of throwing every single feature at them, like, let's start creating a base level user that everybody's got to go through. And maybe they need to get their little certification before they have their, kickoff call or thing. Well, it's all situation dependent and everything like that. And then maybe there's an advanced class again, but as you said, knowing
absolutely. You have to look at this. I have, I call it, Maslow has this hierarchy of needs. You've got food, clothing, shelter, and I have one for the implementations organization, because you have to, the base of your pyramid is so critical, because that is where you have to get the basics right. If you don't have the basics installed and people using just simple core features, they're never going to progress, because as you get up that particular pyramid, unless they can use the base effectively, they're not going to be able to integrate, they're not going to be able to use advanced features. They're not going to be able to understand how to expand it throughout their organizations. And, I like to get closer to, the nirvana features when they start doing API integrations with other products. That's where you want to get your customers, because it makes them so sticky. It makes the renewal so much easier.
Absolutely.
And, and you get to the nirvana, that peak of the pyramid is features like, the AI functionality. But I think if your experience has been like mine, those AI functionalities don't work unless you've gone up the pyramid correctly and filled out the base in order. So you really can't leverage the nirvana features unless you have got a robust base to your program.
Yeah, you got to put the time in. Absolutely. One last question, and then we'll move to the non-work stuff. But a lot of people that listen to this podcast are, they've just been handed a department. Like now I own implementation too. Oh, okay, right. So if you had to give sort of your like top 3 tips it could be one too, if you feel it's ultimate, like make sure you do X, Y, and Z, that you experienced when you sort of took over the implementation system. What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, I think that implementations should not be some mystical thing. You have to follow your gut because these are just normal business problems. So, if your sales org is coming to you and saying, hey, I've got this renewal coming up and these guys aren't implemented, you have a problem. You've got to reduce the time for the implementation. You need to talk to your implementation team and figure out what are the core things that are taking so long in the implementation. Then you've got your short list. You can stack rank and prioritize this, and you can start whittling things down. I mean, a common one is, well, we do status meetings every week. What happens on the status calls? Well, not a whole lot. Well, there goes the status call. Let's say, no meetings without agendas. Work with your legal organization to incorporate implementation limits. Start working on front in the sales process. So a lot of this stuff, it's actually just a giant logic problem. Yeah. And I would just break it down. There is no magic bullet to implementations. If you have an organization that you've inherited, I would say just if it's troubled, if there's challenges, just break the challenges down into smaller components and start solving them one at a time. Yeah. And think about what you can do to scale it. Another key thing I would say to look at people, look at anything your team is doing that's repeatable. Can that be templatized and automated? Because, automation, sure, it does take a little bit of elbow grease to get running, but it pays dividends in the long run.
Yeah, there's your scalability question. So how do you scale the team without, as you said, 2x sales, 2x people? Like that does not work.
It's scary. It actually is scary when especially when you're working so fast, the work queues are full. Yeah. To actually say, I'm going to take time out of every single day to do something that's not going to forward a customer implementation right now, but I can reuse this object on every implementation going forward. I tell my team, it's like making an investment. We each have to take an hour to invest in our future because it's going to pay dividends.
Yeah. Just like, as a classic example, those emails that will go out sequentially to go work on X, Y, and Z. It's a classic example. Like who wants to sit down and write those? And a lot of people get addicted to the busy stress work and because I'm completing stuff and everything. But those are great tips. Yeah.
You just be bailing the boat your whole life. Fix the boat. Don't bail it out. Bailing's easy, but it's tiring. It'll burn you out. Just fix the boat.
Yeah. And I've seen the biggest pushback I get when I try and do this at companies is the sales team saying that's going to make this more complicated. Well, we just want to basically make this experience just super great and happy and easy. So we don't want to slap them with all these legal terms and the SOW and everything like that. That's the pushback I usually get with this stuff. So, yeah.
And that's actually an easy thing to overcome. It's very common. Most software MSAs have limitations on the implementation services. Yeah. And, it is very common that the sales team is going to react negatively because they do see it as a roadblock. But if you resource them with the appropriate tools and knowledge, all of a sudden your implementation process can go from being, just something that has to get done to making it a market differentiator. Yeah. That if you're apples to apples with the next product, if you have the amazing implementation process that helps your customer get real value very quickly, if you go on those review sites and you compare your old apple to apple competitor, you're going to find people are talking about more value coming from your product than the other guy because you're implementing better, stronger, and faster.
Yep. I don't think we could say another word about it. Like that's a great cherry on the top. So I'm going to just say, just to wrap things up, I usually ask people what their newfound hobby was during the COVID season. Are you on the bread baking or the ukulele?
I considered the ukulele. I did not get a sourdough starter. I have none of that.
So we're both salty Bostonians for people to know. So we're
exactly. So I actually moved back to the United States at the beginning of the pandemic. I had been working in Norway, and I was very grateful because for pandemic isolation, the Norwegians left me with some really great work-life balance skills. So working from home actually became very easy for me because I was able to separate working life and home life. So I have to say that I think my quarantine activity or superpower was, well, first, I didn't get executive platinum flying status. I could only make platinum pro on my own. And spending all this time here at home, I think I really just became an expert on, living my best life in quarantine. So if the
Yeah.
apocalypse truly does happen, I'm rock solid.
You're good. I'm the same way. I'm good. I'll nap. Got lots of
Yeah,
food. I'm good.
yeah, and like really on the topic of food, since I moved back to Norway, I finally have access to a lot more ingredients. So in this pandemic, I have been cooking like crazy. I've been cooking my way through South Asia, and
Wow.
I think I am reaching expert level with a wok. So
Wow.
there you go.
There
There's
you
my
go.
quarantine activity.
I look forward to your ebook with recipes.
Absolutely.
All right, Meg, a pleasure. Thanks for geeking out on implementation. Hold on one quick second here.